Okay, so we are going to begin today. We are going to go through digitizing a logo start to finish. So we're going to go through the process of bringing in an image file, digitizing it manually, and we'll use some of our quick, easy keys like duplicating, carousel, reflect. We will also talk about changing start and stop points. So we're going to go through quite a bit today, but it's all going to be based off this one logo that we're going to digitize. So the first thing is most of the time we have an image already created, like a JPEG or a PNG or maybe a vector file that we're going to then convert into our DST file. So I do have a vector file, and vector files like Illustrator or SVG, those are really going to work best with Chroma. We can actually most of the time auto digitize those very quickly and then just go and make some edits. So I'm going to bring in my image and I'm just going to do file import. So if you're importing a vector file, it's going to be import artwork. And if you're importing an image file like a PNG or a JPEG, that will be a bitmap. So mine is actually a vector file. And we can see that here, it's an AI file. So I'm going to open this and it places that image onto my screen. And now it's pretty big, so I can always shrink it down to the actual size that I want to digitize at. So we can easily drag and drop the corners. I can also, in the upper right-hand corner where I have some settings boxes, I can also click onto the transform box and I could enter in my size there. So right now it's about 3.81 and maybe I want it to be 3 inches by 3 inches. So it's always important to digitize at the actual scale that you want to embroider at. If I was going to make this logo 1 inch by 1 inch, it would be very, very different from if it was 7 inches by 7 inches. So anything very, very small, you do have to make sure that you are digitizing properly. But this logo is just a standard size, 3 inch by 3 inches, pretty good. So I'll apply and then I can start working with my different stitch tools. Now, one thing to know is that since this is a vector file, it is actually going to be very easy for me to auto digitize it. It's really clean outlines. So if I were to select this, I could tap on the auto digitize key even after I've brought it onto the screen. And again, here we have it. It's looking okay, but you will notice that in some areas it selected a satin and in other areas it selected complex fill. So that might not be what I really wanted it to be. So even though it is going to auto digitize pretty easily, I would still have to make a lot of edits. So we're not going to auto digitize this today. I'm actually going to digitize manually. So I'm just going to remove that. But just to give you an idea, and we can always just click the auto digitizer right off the bat. And we could bring in that image from our Finder, and then we can have it auto digitized that way. So it's working the same way. There's not really anything different there, except that you can see it's actually all complex fill because it is at that larger scale. So you can definitely try the auto digitizer when you have a logo, but I think that it's very important for us to know how to manually create shapes and to manually digitize. That way we know the fundamentals and we know how to edit as well. So this file, the next thing that I would look at or think about is how we want this to stitch out. Now, if this was going to go onto a hat, we always want our hat files to stitch from the middle going outwards and then the bottom to the top. So I would start with this logo in the center, the C's, and then maybe do the text and then finish with the clover design and have it move up towards the top. And that's going to give us the best sequence for a hat. So on this file, let's create the C part of the logo. On that part, I'm envisioning it in a satin stitch. That's going to be a nice smooth stitch. It makes most sense, but of course we could always use a complex fill. I could even just make it an outline if I wanted to use the steel stitch. So we have quite a few different stitch options that we can use, but I'm going to use my classic satin. So I'll click on the classic satin and I'm just going to start with one area. So I'm going to start here at the bottom right. So I'm going to move from the bottom right and then have the design move upwards. When we're making a classic satin stitch, we always have to click left to right, then move downwards, or click top to bottom and then move to the side. So I'm going to click here, and now I can move my way around this shape. So we're just making sort of a little column that is connected by these points. Just clicking side to side, side to side, and we can slowly move around the shape until we are able to finish it off. Now I want to actually zoom in a little bit towards this corner. So I can hit on the space bar on my keyboard and that will allow me to pan even while I'm in the middle of digitizing. So the space bar is going to allow you to pan around, and now I can get in a lot closer and I can really see my logo here and get those really close outlines. And then I'm going to right click and finish it off. Now it's yellow because my first color chip on the menu bar here is yellow. I can always change the color later. It doesn't quite matter so much. So I have one section and let me just take a look closer using the shape tool. And I just want to make sure all of my lines are really nice and clean and smooth. So I always like to edit the shape right after. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at this pink outline. So the pink outline is showing me the full border. And then we have some yellow angle lines. They're separated by black dots. And then we'll also see some blue points, and those can be maneuvered and edited as well. So what I want to do is I just want to edit the outline of this object and make sure that it's fully lining up with the edge of the black image. I'm going to right click on either the outline or the blue dot, and I'm going to choose Edit Outlines. And what that will do is it's just going to hide all of the it's going to hide all of the yellow lines. It's going to hide all of the green dots, the red dots. So I'm able to just choose what I want to edit. So now we can really zoom in and we can see that I have some nice curves, and I can just drag these lines wherever I might need. So we have our shape here, and again, I'm just going to edit the outlines so that everything lines up nicely. So we're doing this by just dragging the blue points closer to the edge of the shape. And then we could work on editing those little angle lines just to make sure those are all consistent. So we really want all of these stitches to move around the shape in a really nice, smooth method. So the yellow angle lines are important to take a look at as well. And now we have a much cleaner, better looking shape or object. So we're going to take this shape, and it looks like I have an identical shape at the top left. So I could just copy this and use it again. And that's going to save me a lot of time, and it'll also be identical. The first thing though is I am seeing a lot of space in between these stitches. So I really want to actually change the density before I go to make the second shape. Density is at the top right of the screen, and we can just lower it to about 0.3. That's a good sweet spot for density. Now to duplicate a shape, we can right click, we can copy, then we can paste it, and it's going to paste right on top. Or I could hold down on the Control key on my keyboard and I could drag one. So there are different ways to duplicate. Just copy paste works out, or using the Control key. So now I have this shape, and what I could do is I could just rotate it around, and then I'm going to place it onto that black area. And oops, so now we have this perfect duplicate, and that saved me quite a bit of time. Now I'm going to then create the other shape of this C logo, and we can probably do the same thing because it does look identical again. And then I did mention, if we were putting this on a hat, we'd still want it to be, middle out, but I would probably want, say, this shape to go first, then the bottom left shape, and then we can move things around. So you can always resequence afterwards. So just keep that in mind. But this was really meant for putting this on a shirt because it is quite large. It's about 3 inches high. So we just want to make sure that we take that into account. So I'm going to go back to the classic satin stitch. And I will create the other shape. So starting from the top here and just clicking left to right, and then I'm going to move my way down. If you've taken a shaping and editing webinar, then you will be familiar with how we create curved lines. And the way that we're doing that is we are going to hold down on the Control key on our keyboard as we're clicking. And so if you look at the bottom line here, you can see how it's curved, and you can also see that those blue dots, they're circular and not square. So when we're making a straight line, you'll see that those blue points are square, and when we're making a curved line, you'll see that they are circles. So if I need the lines to curve slightly, I'm going to hold down on the Control key as I just create these points. I'm just working around the shape, just adding in points, holding the control key still because we do have some curved lines. So I want it to curve around the shape. And you can see there on the left, you can see right here, it is curving. Okay, so it's going to give us a nice smoother shape. And I'm just panning around. So again, tapping the space bar allows me to move around on the screen as I'm digitizing. And then I'm just using my mouse to zoom in and out. So I have lines continue, and you can see that since I'm holding on control, these lines are really snapping into that curve along the edges of the shape. Okay, so we have almost our final secondary shape, but like I mentioned before, I do want to click on my shape tool and just make sure I edit all of the outlines so that it's perfect before I go to duplicate this. So we'll just select the object and we'll tap onto our shape tool. So I'm so far switching just back and forth between the selection tool and the shape tool. So shape tool, and then now I'm just going to zoom in, and I just want to edit the outlines first. So I want to right click and just choose edit outlines. And now I can see all of these points. Another thing that we talk about in the shaping webinar is the ability to change a straight point into a curved point. So like if we take a look down here at these blue squares, I can actually right click and I can change those into smooth, meaning now it's going to be a circle. So I can change these to be smooth, and that way it'll allow me to have a nice curve. And I can edit like that little seesaw looking object, and that will edit the curvature. So you can convert any points that you might need into smooth or straight. So if I wanted to make this one smooth, you can see it actually gives me a little bit of a curve. So you can really do a lot. I would encourage you to take a look at the shaping and editing webinar. It is on the YouTube channel. We have those probably every other week, and that's very important because it does go through using different stitch types, editing, shapes, what all of your editing capabilities are. And that's definitely important for getting really nice designs. So I'm just lining up all of these outlines right to the edge of the black. That way it's really going to be a perfect shape. So if you guys have any questions, you can use that chat box and type out your questions, and I will take a look and be able to answer. Okay, and then we still want to take a look at these angle lines and just straighten out any of them. Just make sure they're really looking nice and consistent. So I know they're very hard to see now. Let's maybe change to green, and that way we can see those yellow lines. So they're separated by a black dot, so we can really just drag those black dots, and I'm just straightening them out here at the bottom because we want those stitches to really run like top down in this section. And then of course we will have a little bit of a shift, and it's going to change direction when we get towards the top of that shape. Okay. So let's change our density. We can do that straight away. We're already on that fill tab, so we can just lower that density. And then now let's duplicate this object, and we're going to flip it around just like we did for the other yellow area. And I can just kind of peek at the outlines and really place it just right on top. So I only created 2 shapes, and then I just duplicated them. It works out with this logo just due to the symmetrical nature. Okay, and then why don't we just change the color of everything? So I'm going to make it purple just so we have a little difference. So we have that area of the logo, and again, we can always resequence. So the way that it's going to stitch out now, if I click onto my slow redraw, it's going to do that shape, then it's going to do the top, then it's going to move around here and finish. So the thing about sequencing is also we really want our machine to be able to jump from one object to the next very easily. So I would really want this to stitch first, which it does, but then I would want this to go next. If we look in our sequence panel, we can see our 4 satin shapes. And if I wanted to resequence something, I can just click it and drag it over top. So I selected it and I just dragged it. And now if we look at how it sequences, it does this object first, then it does this object next, and then we have the top, then we have the other. So again, sequencing is really just for making sure your machine can move around your design easily, make less color changes or less trims, and then also if it's for a cap, we always want it to begin in the middle, go outwards, and then from the bottom going up. So the next part is let's make this clover, and then let's make these little leaf designs. Because the text, we could just use our text tool for that, and that's fairly easy to do. So first thing is I have these little leaf shapes. I could try to just create that shape using one of my stitch tools, but we have a really easy tool in the artwork tool. And this is going to allow us to make some quick shapes very quickly, and then we can just auto digitize them or convert them into the stitch we want. So there is like a leaf shape, and it looks like that, which is very, very similar to the shape that we have here in that 4 leaf sort of clover. So if I made this shape here, and it looks fairly similar, we can actually always edit this after. So I have this, I'm going to make it orange, and I'm going to right click and convert it into a satin stitch. So we could also right click, we can convert to, maybe we want it to be complex fill. Maybe we want it to be an open steel stitch. Maybe we want it to be a run stitch. Like we could really make it any type of stitch that we want. I'm going to make it satin, and then click on the shape tool and edit so that it's actually the correct shape. So we need to bring this point down. We actually need to make this more rounded, so we can actually right click, smooth. Now it's rounded. We can bring these sides inwards. Oh, there's actually 2 points hidden there. So we can bring these in. We can adjust these little seesaw objects. That helps to change the curve. So let's see, I'm going to bring this. I'm going to kind of curve it a bit. So we're just editing the outline so that it really fits. Okay, so we have everything looking really nice, and we could change our angle line so that it's more of a side to side. And then why don't we just change the density, and there we have our nice shape. And again, I don't need to do this 4 times. These all look pretty similar. This one might be a little larger, but let's just duplicate. So I'm gonna click on my control key and just drag one off, drag another, and we're gonna just rotate and place. So whenever you have something that looks the same or is the same, just duplicate it. We don't have to make 4 shapes. And now all of these are identical. And so this one, maybe it's just a slightly bigger for some reason. So this one as well, like we could just drag it out slightly. Now in this area, we have these jump stitches. And that looks crazy, and we don't want to have to edit those. So, or we don't want to have to trim those on our machine or after it stitches. That's going to be like too much work. It's unnecessary. What I would want to do is either we add a trim, which we could do. If we wanted to add a trim, we would select all of these, and in the upper right-hand command tab, we would add an end command to trim. So that would work fine. It would add in a trim. If I click apply, you can see it trimmed. But we also want to make our machine a lot more efficient and quick. And so since these are so small, why don't we just have the jump stitch go from one point to the next? And we might have just like a little tiny X in the middle, which we could still always trim after. The way that we're going to change the jump stitch is we're going to change our start and stop points. So the first object that stitches is this one here. If I click on the shape tool, we see these red and green. If this object starts at the top and finishes at the bottom, and then if the next object starts at the bottom, then we have now a much shorter jump stitch. And so if we edit these to have the start and stop closer to each other, then we have these shorter jump stitches that we could still trim off, but if it's a really small design, you might not even notice that. So that's just a method that you can try to eliminate or just reduce the length of a jump. Okay. So far we have our design. Now just in the middle of this, let's say we're gonna, end this and pick up tomorrow. We always want to save the original RDE file. Whenever you go to File Save As, it will automatically have Chroma RDE. That is the working file type. So that is the file type that we are able to edit. That's the file type that saves all of our commands, saves our colors. The original RDE file is what we need to always save. Okay. Once we're finished and once we're ready to put it on the machine, that's when we would go to save the DST. And we would save a copy as the DST. So you always want to have two files, the original RDE file, then you can save a copy for the machine as DST. So let's take a look at these shapes. Now this looks very detailed, very difficult. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use our duplicate and our carousel key. What I want to do is I want to create at least one of these rounded shapes. I could probably use that leaf tool again because we can get something that looks pretty similar. So it looks, about the same. I'm going to make it green. And we could really change the shape and just sort of move everything so that it lines up perfectly with the shape. Another and then of course we need to convert this because right now it's just an outline. Another trick that we can do that you have the ability to in Chroma Plus or Lux is we could just use, say, our complex fill tool, and I could just sort of create my own outline from scratch just by clicking on the edges, and I'm holding Control to get those curved lines, and we can finish it off. And this is complex fill right now, but I can always convert it into a different stitch type. So we could use either method to get these shapes. Now, so I have two of them, and again, we can take a look at the start and stop points, right? We want it to stop where the other one begins. We can also, let's take a look at the density. Let's lower that a bit. They're very small, so 0.4 is a good density. Now, I'm going to duplicate this to move all the way around the shape. And we can do this in a couple different ways. I'm going to group these together so that they're a pair. So I'm going to right-click, group. And then I could, tap on Control and I could move them and like slowly just keep adding more and more and more like that. Or what I could do is I could take one and I can use my carousel tool. The carousel tool is a circle that looks like it has a bunch of little dots. It's just underneath the slow redraw. And when I click on the carousel tool, it opens up this screen where it is repeating this object. You can see as I add more repeats, it's repeating this object in like a big circle. What we want to do is my circle size, so the size of this image is about 3 inches, right? So I can tap in 3, and now you can see they're a lot closer together. I also have quite a few repeats. So let's say maybe I type in 40. Now I have quite a few repeating. What you can do before you hit on carousel is you could actually measure the size of the circle. I mean, mine is set to 3 inches, the whole logo, so I know that it's 3. You can also count how many are repeating. So if we did a quick count, 3, 6, 9. So we could say like 25 or so times 2. So you can take a couple like measurements, but essentially we are typing in the circle size. Then we're typing in the repeats, and we can see how it looks now. You can also change the angle. So if the angle, you change it, you're kind of adding in more or less. So I just want it to stay at 50. And then let's click OK. So now I have this shape that really looks like it's going to work perfectly for those small leaves. But of course, it doesn't continue all the way around the circle, and our angle might be a little different. So all I need to do is I just need to break it up. So I'm going to like split it in half and select only half of it. So right now it's in a group. We're going to right click, ungroup, and then I'm going to select half and just kind of drag it off to the side. Okay. So I'm going to maybe I can cut out a couple of these. Could just delete some, just selecting them and deleting. Now I'm going to take this and I'm just going to sort of place it onto my shape and gently curve. So we're really getting, we're getting super close to how this curves, right? I can even delete this part because I don't need that. Once I get the right side correct, I'm just going to duplicate that and then I can flip it. Okay. So again, you're just using your tools, your carousel. You're gonna just kind of rotate, and I'm just trying to get these to line up as best they can with the black. Okay. And so unless this is like an, you know, really specific logo, like this shaping here, all of these being identical and having the same spacing, I could really just keep it sort of like that. If we hide our backdrop, like this looks just like the logo, right? So even though it's not quite lining up, and if you need it to be exact, well, you can easily drag these. You can still grab what you need and move it around. So, you know, over here, the bottom one looks like it's lining up okay, but then these aren't quite lining. So we can still move them and rotate them individually. But if you want something that looks, you know, really identical and symmetrical, you can just kind of keep it as is. And for the very top section, I can duplicate one and I can rotate that to fit in on that top so that we have a top leaf. Okay. Now comes the, now comes the part where we take a look at those jump stitches, because we still have a jump and I don't necessarily want to have that many trims. So we could really, what we would need to do is really just be have the start and stop points changed. And so as I'm changing the stop point just of the top leaf, you can see that that jump stitch is moving in the center of the shape here. So when we go to add the center branch of these little leaves, then it's going to actually cover that jump stitch. So we can just move them all, and I'm going to do this before I duplicate the object, and that way it will actually save. Okay, so we're just moving. And again, they're not lined up. I can certainly go through each one and really place them right on top of the black. But as far as just sake of time and showing you how to make something very like symmetrical, I'm just leaving them as is. I think this one I had moved actually. So just clicking each one, moving that stop point down to the middle so that it will keep the jump stitch all in the center of that object. So I'm going to make that center stem, and I am going to use my steel stitch. The steel stitch looks like this. It looks like a satin, but the way we create it is just using a single line. So with that steel stitch, I can start at the top or bottom. It doesn't quite matter. If we really want to make this sequence out correctly, what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see how these green leaves will sequence. So I'm going to do slow redraw, and I can go to the green, and we can see the green actually starts at the top and they actually move their way down. So after the leaves finish, that's where I want the stem to actually begin at the bottom, and then it will continue up towards the top. So here's how I'm going to do that. I have my steel stitch selected. The width of the steel stitch should probably just be like 1.5 or 2 millimeters. And I'm going to click at the bottom and using my control key, make a curved line. I'm just clicking right into the center of where all of these leaves are at. Making just short clicks so that it can really curve nicely. And then at the end, finish. And there we have our center stem. We can make sure that at the top, this shape really connects well with the steel stitch. So we want it to be able to connect. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to add a point, and that way I can sort of drag out the corner so that they meet. And it looks like one object. Okay? At the bottom, we can make that little sort of circle. And I could just use my classic satin. And I can make sort of like a rounded shape. Okay. Now, all of the green, I want to select all of the green and group it all together. We can select all of the green or all of one color in our lower right-hand sequence panel. And then I can set the density. I'm going to do 3. And then I can also right-click and group. And now this object is one full group. So what I did here, I made little leaves. I used carousel to duplicate them. And then I just used the change the start and stop points to really make the jump stitch in the center, and then use the steel down the middle. And when I just duplicate it, I can flip it. So we have a mirror tool. It's at the top, just below the lock. There's one below the start and stop, and that's flip. So mirror will mirror on the vertical And then I just want to rotate it. And we place it, and once we add our text, Charm City, I'm going to change the text. Looks like maybe we can use just something that we have in our catalog here. I'm going to use a times. Okay, so I'll turn on that backdrop again, that way we can see. So I have Charm City, shrink it down, rotate, then I'll use the text tool again so that I can make the paintball. And I can change the color. Shrink it. We can make sure that these are identical in height, and that way the text, oops, far too small. Okay, and you can always select the whole thing, change the color, and there we have our design. You can remove that little jump stitch. We always want to save the RDE file. Okay, so we used quite a bit of tools, and luckily this logo was very symmetrical. We used our artwork tool, we used the text tool, we used the carousel. We also really focused on changing the start and stop points, which is important for really good sequencing of a design. And that way we can have, eliminate some trims. We can really have our machine move around the design very easily and be able to be efficient. So super important to focus on that. And we have our logo, and so we can always change the colors as well. I just made it all one. But again, changing colors, you're just selecting the object, and then you can right click on a color chip. So I could select the whole thing, right click on a different color chip, and there we have it.